Take a look at these three smartphones. This is the Samsung Galaxy S8, this is the Google Pixel 2 XL, and this is the iPhone 10. Now take a look at these three, the Galaxy S20 Ultra, the Pixel 5, and the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Okay, a little more similar, but still some differences. Now look at these, the Galaxy S24, the Pixel 9 Pro, and the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Gee, smartphones are getting pretty boring. There was a point in time where smartphones were exciting. Everybody got excited to see what each company would do with their new model, with new designs, colors, and features, and rising but still competitive pricing. But over the years, it's gotten kind of dull. There's been less color, less new designs, less innovation. The past 4 years of phones don't feel that different from each other, especially iPhones. And I think I have some pretty good reasons as to why that's the case. Google always set out to be the iPhone of Android, which makes sense. A big part of both of them is their software. Even their first Pixel was praised for its great UI experience. Also, isn't it funny that the first Pixel kind of looks like the iPhone 6? I know, HTC designed the phone, but still. It kind of looks like it. But it feels like they're really trying to walk that same path. They've even been making their own chip for the past 4 years. You know, the same thing Apple's been doing forever. I admit this isn't the hardest hitting evidence, especially since the other Pixels aren't referenced from Apple in any way. In fact, Google, along with most Android companies, seem to have copied Samsung's approach of the front design, which brings me to my next point. Over the years, phones have become more and more similar in design. Whereas once curved, glossy displays are now flat, color-faded matte finishes. I mean, look at the phones from 6 years ago. They all have their own unique designs with a variety of colors. Now they all follow the same shape, with the differences being primarily the camera layout. I don't really hate this trend, but in terms of practicality, it is kind of annoying. The squared off build makes it harder to grip, and while the pastel colors age well, they look so dull and boring whenever they do make phones with vibrant colors. To be honest though, the same could be said vice versa. Take the iPhone XR for example. It was one of the only iPhones of the time, besides the 5C that we won't talk about, to come out with an assortment of punchy, eye-catching colors. While I don't believe it was the main reason why it was the highest selling iPhone of that year, many people really liked it. Now you all know phone designs change, and depending on what was popular, it can age as fine as wine or as poor as LG. I'd say the iPhone XR aged somewhat decently. The design is simplistic, but most phones come with a dual camera setup nowadays, so I've just been really used to that. Then again, I really like the look of the Pixel 2 and 3, so I mean, I guess it's the same thing, kind of. Maybe Google still was copying Apple. Regardless, by the time the 15 came out, it made the XR look like a toy. The vibrant colors look too brash and cheap, while the more faded colors come off as elegant and serious. Well, that was the case until the 16 came out. You see what I mean? This trend has reached the flagships on the Android side. Take the Pixel 9 Pro for example. It comes in very basic and generic colors: white, pink, black, and gray. In fairness, the base Pixel 9 comes in a cool green and a more saturated pink, but I don't like the model specific color strategy. You should have the option to buy the cheapest or most expensive model in whatever option they have. I know some of you are saying it's a sales strategy. I know, and I don't care. Samsung does it, why can't everyone else? Speaking of Samsung, the Galaxy S24 also comes in some very boring colors: black, purple, gray, and yellow, with 3 online exclusive colors: blue, green, and orange. The purple and orange are kind of vibrant, but they're the only colors that seem somewhat interesting. The other ones are okay. The S9, in my opinion, came in way better colors. You could actually see them, for starters, and I personally prefer the glossy look. The iPhone 16 kind of perfected the mixture of not too saturated and not too subtle, but years later they could try something different, and these may or may not age well. It's a constant switch. Also, isn't it kind of funny that when Apple does faded and desaturated, all the other companies follow suit? But it's funny because this year Apple did the opposite. Over the years, phones have become very similar in what they provide. At one point, phones were known for having an incredibly good trait that separated them from the rest. Samsung had the best display in any smartphone, Apple is a completely different OS with so much efficiency and ease, Google had the best camera while not having as many, OnePlus had the fastest phone with top tier performance while being significantly cheaper than everyone else. Now, it's not like this stuff is completely gone, but it's not as apparent. Every phone has a good screen with great cameras and solid performance. I don't need to buy a Galaxy for the best display. The Pixel doesn't have a noticeably better camera. OnePlus is fast, but even Apple put 120Hz in their top models. A lot of the selling points of phones today are small features that nobody would miss if they didn't have it. Take the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra and the S24 Ultra. What's so different about these phones other than their design? They both have great cameras with 120Hz and squared off displays. Sure, the S24 Ultra has newer hardware, but you don't notice the difference if you're not using them side by side. Things like AI and high refresh rates are great, but they shouldn't be the biggest traits of a phone. And this is kind of what I mean. Each phone doesn't feel like a significant improvement to last year's. Now, I am of the firm belief that new phones aren't for people who bought last year's or even the year before's phone, but rather people who are upgrading from, 5, 6, 7-year-old phones. But if you don't mind getting used, why would you get an S24 Ultra when a Note 20 Ultra is like 98% of that phone, and you can find it for much cheaper? Unless you really like flat displays, I feel like I'd be hard pressed to sell you this phone compared to the Note 20 Ultra. They're just too similar, but too different in terms of price. There are good things with this similarity trend. For the average person, it can be kind of hard to switch to different brands and software, and by making all options easier, you can attract more customers. This is good for the average person who just wants a great all-around phone, but for people in the tech space, it's boring and unimaginative. It's funny how uncreativity is benefiting the ones who aren't enthusiastic about said thing, but phones are very important in general, so it's understandable. We've covered many examples of phones becoming similar in almost every way, from the design to the colors and even the hardware, but there's a bigger point to this. There's a reason why companies, Android specifically, are making their phones more and more familiar. They all want a slice of the apple pie. You see, Apple has always been the biggest rival to all Android devices. They've built themselves to be a competent Android competitor, with many cases of them being the better choice. There was Huawei, but they got banned before gaining any traction. iPhones are so popular, more specifically in the US, due to their constant quality, integration, and simplicity. Whether you like it or not, they inarguably make some of the best phones ever, and their sales back up that statement. That doesn't mean there aren't criticisms of Apple, but they aren't enough to shake their loyal fan base, no matter how valid those criticisms are. And every company knows this, which is why instead of trying to stand out, they try to be like them. Let's look at the sales of the Galaxy S7. It sold over 55 million units, and the first Pixel sold 3 million. The iPhone 7 and 7 Plus sold 159 million units. That's more than both Samsung and Google sales combined. Though, to be fair, this was the first Pixel, so low sales are bound to happen. But then let's look at the S8 and Note 8. Combined, they sold 53 million units, and the Google Pixel 2 and 2 XL sold 4 million units. The iPhone 10 sold 63 million units, and that was essentially just a redesigned 8 Plus. Heck, the Galaxy S10 lineup, Samsung's most feature-packed phone, sold a fifth of the iPhone 11 lineup. It's without a doubt that no matter how good Androids are, Apple has become too big and too popular. So if you can't beat them, be like them. This is why displays are getting flatter. This is why colors are getting duller. This is why software is getting more and more familiar. Google and Samsung aren't trying to compete with each other. They're trying to compete with Apple. I'm sure it's not that hard to get a Samsung fan to try a Pixel and a Google fan to try a Galaxy. Sure, they're different looks and feels, but they run on the same OS. It always has been much harder to get an Apple fan to switch to any Android. With Android, you have the option to revert back to your familiarity. If you don't like a certain UI or skin, you can just install it from the Google Play Store or sideload it off the internet. And the phones can't hold value to save their life, so you have so many options for a steal. There's always some similarity with Android phones, and if there isn't one, you can get one. It's not the same for iPhones. The ecosystem is so deep and exclusively smooth. Their software support has always been incredibly heavy. You can't even put some random unofficial part in your iPhone without it knowing. They've built this reputation of quality and reliability so much that people just don't want to leave them. The average person prefers to stick to their guns, so Android companies aren't going to give them any more reason to do so. I'm not entirely sure if this will turn the tide in the smartphone market, but this is the best way to get iPhone users to the other side. As understandable as this is, it ruins the soul of Androids. But known for being creative and different, it's the land of choice and freedom, but by becoming too similar, it's not as interesting. Back then, there were multiple reasons to get an S9 Plus over a Pixel 2 XL, and vice versa. But I honestly couldn't tell you why you should get the S24 Plus over the Pixel 9 Pro. And at the end of the day, all of these companies have to make money, so whatever helps reach their bottom line is what we'll get, which I completely understand. I won't lie though, I do miss when Androids really stood out. It's possible we might get to a point where creativity and being different are the main goals again, but we'll just have to see.